hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no, thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch unconscious. Don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew, make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
So, you see, that's a very cool way I thought of making us understand the concept of consent. And of course, there are still maybe gray areas that you don't understand what to do about, but this is kind of a very cool visual to remember for yourself. Now, coming back to the laws, as I said, that there are, of course, some legal barriers for many victims or survivors where they cannot go to law and ask for help. Now, whether it is sexual assault, sexual violence in the form of sexual violence or rape, remember that it causes trauma, it causes physical harm, and of course, it is very detrimental to the sexual well-being of the person who has to undergo this, right? But what do we talk about when we talk about rape? So what I would like is, if possible, can you just quickly, and all of you, just for a second, think about the first thing that comes to your mind and tell me, what do you think about when you think about rape? Anyone? Come on, guys. It's not that hard. It's rape. We talk about it all the time.
So
Yes,
yeah,
I
on
can
the
see.
chat. Okay, right.
Helplessness, violence, trauma, no consent, force. Okay, disgusting and heinous act. So thank you. Yes, perfect. But you see, yes, mental trauma, disgusting again. When we think about rape, we think about the event, right? We think about the event of rape. We think about the victim, and we think about the perpetrator. Who is this monstrous man? And the victim is this helpless woman that happened, whose whole life is destroyed, and she'll never ever be the same again, right? So this is Sohaila Abdulali, and this is the, oh, I don't know whether you can see this. Give me a second. So this is her book. It is called What Do We Talk About When We Talk About Rape? So if you don't know about her, she was raped in 1980 in Mumbai. And she was the kind of the first person who became public and publicly talked about her experience as a rape victim, right? And so the one thing that we don't talk about when we talk about rape is going beyond that victim and perpetrator. And now think about the fact that most of these incidences happen with people where the perpetrators are known to them, right? So there is another person there, or another place, or another agency at work, which is the role of the bystander. So what I want to do is not think about sexual violence in terms of toxic masculinity, which I think is a negative framework, where we focus on the perpetrator, the man, and we think about it is this man versus woman dichotomy, and we think about why do men do these things. I want to shift this and talk about to a more positive framework, which is that of an active bystander. Now, an active bystander can be anyone, a man or a woman. It is a person who is present or who is seeing that thing happening. So he can see a sexual assault or a sexual violence happening. He can see someone getting uncomfortable. And you know what will happen when we start thinking about about rape and sexual violence from the point of the bystander? Then we will not we can think of ourselves as someone who can help, right? So we can, for women or men, whether you have been a victim, whether you have been someone who has done something which you later realized can constitute sexual violence, you can think of yourself in a more positive framework about how you can be of more help. So what does a bystander mean? So a bystander is someone who learns to recognize when someone is in danger and how you can intervene safely. And that is an essential skill. So all of you being management students, I'm sure you are going to go into workplaces where at some point you might, well, chances are probably for sure, you will find yourself in some place dealing with a situation like this, right? Where you see someone making a joke that clearly is making someone else uncomfortable. You see someone talking to someone and run their hand behind their back in a way that is meant to be a joke, but you can clearly see that that person is uncomfortable. And it doesn't happen always between men and women. Lots of men have this habit of touching private areas of other men, and it is supposed to be okay because it's between men. But if it makes someone uncomfortable, then it's not okay, right? So learning the skill of how to intervene in a safe way is essential for management students. And by being an active, what did I mean by being an active bystander? By an active bystander, I meant someone who is aware when someone's behavior is inappropriate or threatening, and then they choose to challenge it, but in a way that doesn't threaten the victim or the person who's uncomfortable in that situation, right? So the challenge is not equal to violence. So you're not supposed to, if you see someone misbehaving with someone, you're not supposed to go and be all heroic and macho and actually threaten that person. No, because that is ultimately derogatory, because you are even aggravating the whole situation. So again, the answer here is not that toxic masculinity, which tells you that being violent is being masculine. No. So anyone can be an active bystander in this situation, right? It doesn't matter whether you are cis, whether you are hetero, whether you are a man or a woman. And how to do this is now what I will try to talk to you about. So how do you intervene? A disapproving look. Like sometimes when you can see someone, say for example, you are at a distance and you see someone doing something that's making the other person uncomfortable, maybe you can give them a disapproving look that will help them realize that, okay, what I'm doing is someone is watching me and it's not okay. interrupting the conversation or distracting the person with by introducing a new topic or moving them away from the person who was uncomfortable, or moving the person, or maybe talking to the person who was uncomfortable and say, hey, do you want to check out the food counter? Something, it doesn't always have to be complicated. It can be very simple situations, not laughing, surprisingly, can be very powerful. And actually, I had a lot of questions about how to respond to sexist jokes. No sexist joke is okay. Okay, there are no small sexist jokes versus violent sexist jokes. Any kind of sexist joke is not okay. And sometimes when you're standing with a group of people and someone is cracking a sexist joke and you just don't laugh, that can be very powerful. And try it with someone, as an example. Like, next time someone says something sexist, just don't laugh and see the reaction of that person. So talking to a friend about their behavior in a non-confrontational way. So this don't talk while the situation is happening, because it can aggravate the situation, right? But maybe you can talk to them later and just talk to them in a way which makes them realize that what they were doing. You can tell them like, hey, how you came across when you were saying that, it just didn't sound right, something like that. And care for a friend who experienced problematic behavior. So you ask them later whether they're okay, you ask them whether they need help, but if they do not, sometimes there are multiple reasons why a person might not want to pursue it further. Respect that. It's very important that you respect that. So I'm going to talk about how you can call out someone who's continuously says problematic things like that. And I would like to show you, I know many of you must have known Kusha Kapila, right? So she posted this video of how you can call out someone, right, politely. Watch it.
आप तो बहुत ज्यादा रिग्रेसिव बातें करती हैं। आप बड़ी कुत्ती चीज निकली यार। ऐसी बातें ना आप मेरे आगे कर लेते हैं, किसी और के आगे करोगे ना धुलाई होगी आपकी। आपसे कहना था कि आप काफी सेक्सिस्ट हैं, संभल जाइए। ये होमोफोबिया लेके कहाँ जाएंगे? हाँ, जुमड़ी तलैया। You're a casteist. You are projecting your own insecurities onto people. It's not okay. It's hurting the people around you. आप तब भी asshole थे, आप अब भी asshole है। ऐसी you are really abusive and you leave no chance to belittle people. अच्छी बात है. You're really toxic. You really need to check your tone, huh? It's wildly inappropriate. Illegal होनी चाहिए आपकी tone. काफी elitist है आप. देख रही हूँ मैं watching. You are so out of line. Geometry is laughing. Transphobic हैं आप. मान लीजिए. It's not me. It's you. You are problematic. आप तो बहुत ज़्यादा.
So you see, like, you will find a lot of things like this where there are funny ways where you can intervene, and there's a lot of material available online. You get the general drift of what I'm saying, right? But there are other times when the things are more serious and it needs immediate intervention in a way that you can't be safe by doing. Never intervene when you don't feel safe. Call formal authorities, call police. Call if you are in a work environment or if you are in a university environment, ask for formal help, of course. These are bystander intervention is only for situations where you feel safe to intervene. That is very important. So the ABC approach is generally, it is more and more becoming more and more popular. And it is used in Cambridge after the Me Too movement. So Cambridge University came up with this initiative of how bystanders can help, and they're providing workshops to students and staff in helping initiate active bystander help. So what they call it is the ABC approach. First, assess for safety. That is, if you see someone in trouble, ask yourself if you can help safely in any way, right? And sometimes being in a group is much easier to do. So say if you are not feeling comfortable doing it alone, you can call call for help from someone else, and caring for the victim. So talk to the person who you think may need help. Ask them if they're okay. Also ask them what kind of help they need before doing something. Ask them whether they need intervention. Ask them whether they need to move away from that place. What is it that is going to make them feel more comfortable? And remember the 4Ds, right? Direct action. Action can be something that, like what I told you, action can be something like just moving the person away, distracting the person, or just intervening and stopping. Like I said, distraction works really well because it does not aggravate the situation. It gives the person who's uncomfortable time to decide whether what they want to do, whether they want to handle the situation, whether they want to move away. Delegate. If there are situations when you find your friend saying or doing something uncomfortable, and while you know the appropriate thing to do is intervene, you might not be comfortable doing it. And in that situation, rather than completely moving yourself away, try to ask someone else to intervene. And delay. Try to delay the situation or till more help arrives, right? So if you are alone in a situation where you see a confrontation is going on, or where you see there is a potential of any form of sexual assault, try the situation till more help comes your way. When we talk about toxic masculinity now, and now that we have talked about the bystander approach, what we can do is resist what the society is telling you. And I know it's hard. I know it's not easy when the films, the movies, everything is constantly sexualizing women on one hand and urging men to inculcate a particular kind of violent behavior on the other hand. For both men and women to resist these stereotypes is hard, but it is for your benefit if you can do that. Women are not gaining anything by this constant sexualization. Men are not getting anything by this constant hyperbole of toxic masculinity that you are being pervaded with. Ethical responsibility of being human, and how you can do is do not violate the space of another person, whether it's the physical space or the digital space. Now you can ask, like, how do you know what is a violation? A good judgment of that is, do not do anything you won't like being done to yourself. I find like that's a very basic ultimate meter of how to behave with another person, right? Do not do anything that you would not do to yourself. If you wouldn't post or maybe you're comfortable posting a nude of yourself, okay, but that does not mean that the other person might be comfortable, right? So these are basic human judgments that we all know, but we have to resist the urge. The boys locker room incident, you know what it was at the end of the day? It was a group of boys telling each other that we are masculine, right? It was a performance of masculinity more than anything else. So that performance of masculinity is what needs to be resisted, and we can all do it. There is so much conversation around it that we can all do it easily. And I would end by, I know that maybe if you are ever looking for a good show to watch and you are interested on consent, I would definitely recommend Michaela Coel's show, I May Destroy You. It is one of the most nuanced and most sophisticated conversations around sexuality, around consent and sexual violence and rape that I have seen in recent times. And of course, you can, if you have any questions, if you want more resources, you can always get in touch with me on Twitter or on email. I'm always available. So yes, thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chakraborty. That was both enlightening as well educative, because while a lot of us engage in these conversations, and I've had these conversations with you before, but I still feel the way you're able to consolidate everything or most of the important topics that need to be conversed about. And as you rightly pointed out, this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of it, right? I think that is fantastic. I want to thank you for that. So we want to first take some questions that, am I audible, Dr. Chakraborty?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have to take some questions that were sent to us before the talk started. And I've broadly divided these questions into three parts. That's what it seemed to me. One was the general idea of sexism. The next was about gender roles and masculinity, which I was very happy that you talked about how the term toxic masculinity is in fact a very problematic term, because it is actually a dichotomous term which comes out of the mythopoetic movement of the early 20th century, right? So that term itself is very misunderstood. Any form of hegemonic masculinity might not be toxic, and similarly, all forms of toxic masculinity are not hegemonic, right? So I think that's a very important thing you pointed out. So again, the three sort of larger topics which have been given to me here are sexism, gender roles, masculinity, and change. So I'm going to start out with this idea come up, and I'm going to acknowledge those in the chat box as well. Quite a few have come up about digital spaces. So this is a question that comes across often about being the difference between benevolent sexism versus hostile sexism. So both are forms of sexism. How do you? What is your strategy? What do you do?
I think it's very, first of all, the idea of benevolent sexism and is in itself very hard to, it's very abstract. What can be benevolent sexism for me might be just benevolence for someone else, right? So I think if you benevolent sexism, for those who don't know, benevolent sexism is some, like, basically sexism which is meant in a good way, right? So for example, you would find, the other day I was reading that in IT companies you will find many women who are working in the same work level, but they will find that they're given less work, because they're considered like their mothers, so they need like to do other kinds of things. So usse nahi hoga, chalo hum kar lete hain. That is meant to be helpful, but at the end it is gendered or sexist in the reasoning. It is much harder for of course, tackling that is different for men and for women. If you are a man and if you want to be helpful to someone, try to ask yourself whether you would do the same for a male colleague, for example. That's
Can I ask intervene? Sorry, one quick. So when you point this out, it's very important, right? This idea of giving someone less labor because we understand them as less capable, right? So the key idea here is that that person needs to be given that agency or choice, right?
Exactly.
That whether I am. So if you could build a little bit
Yes,
on that.
exactly. So what I meant was, like, you mean to be an ally, right? But you have to be an ally which doesn't perpetuate the gender hierarchy. You have to be an ally in a way that the person you want to help, you need to confirm whether they even want that help in the first place. So for a person to be, first of all, ask yourself, would you do that for a male colleague as well? And second, if you think that yes, you would do that for a male colleague, ask a person whether they need that help. Ask a person whether they are okay, whether they are okay with the workload, whether they want the workload to be lessened, for example. The other problem with benevolent sexism is for women, of course, to to constantly navigate this field of landmines. Like, you feel like you're constantly dodging one after the other. And as a woman, of course, it might be difficult. On the one hand, you do not want to complain and sound like someone said, like, you do not want it to sound like a killjoy. But at the other hand, you are facing something that you think is you're facing because of your gender. I would have loved to say that speak out, but speaking out is is a skill, right? So speaking out in a non-confrontational way is very important. Sometimes it helps when you talk to other women in the office to see that whether they have faced similar things. Official, formal processes exist, but as research has shown, most women do not like to go through formal processes because it creates further sexist frontiers for them to navigate later. the best way I would say again is, as you would do being a bystander, try to deflect, try to find help from colleagues, try to have a conversation which is more nuanced, try to not be confrontational. That's very important. So yeah, I do not have, like I said, I do not have direct yes no answers. I keep thinking about these topics, and some of these answers might not be suitable for you. One of you might have a better response, and so please feel free to talk about it.
Right. So we will definitely, hopefully, because of the limitations of time, and I want to give voice to as many questions as possible. So many of the questions that I have has already been addressed by you about benevolent sexism, about killjoy, about the idea of unlearning, how that unlearning is very important because of the structural problems. But I want to acknowledge the questions that have come in the chat immediately, right? So one of the questions or one of the themes that seems to be there is that in physical spaces, it's often possible to become a bystander or try to not support activity that seems to be sexist, that seems to be in any form discriminatory. But how do you do it in digital spaces? For example, as a question has come in this chat box, that what happens when someone shares a sexist joke on a WhatsApp group? Do you exit these groups? Is that a proper response? And just to add in here, and just my 2 cents, the general idea, as Orpita was talking, Chakraborty was talking about, is that a general framework you see when even when you look at humor from the very well-known comedians of the world, right, from the Dave Chappelle's to the George Carlins, the general standard rule is that they don't punch down, they punch up, right? So you never punch down, you never sort of talk about people in a derogatory manner who have historically been oppressed. For a white male comedian to make terrible blackface jokes is problematic because there's a systemic structure that has promoted that. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge that because someone mentioned what is a joke, what is offensive or not. So sorry, coming back to that point about what do you do in such digital spaces? Is just leaving an option or do you confront, question them?
I think we really need to go beyond this idea of confrontation, like this concept of what see, sexism is in all of us. Sexism is in men, in women. We all are sexist. We all have grown up in a gendered society, and of course these are inculcated inside us. So I don't think exiting a group is ever a question. First of all, this barrier that we see between digital and physical spaces, we have to somehow, like, if you follow the recent debates around digital natives, you will see that the more and more what we are seeing is that our digital personas, of course, are like expressed in a different way, but they are associated with our personal expression, of who we are as people, right? So of course, to give a very concrete example, if you are in a WhatsApp group and someone says something, someone, say you are a guy and another guy has shared a sexist joke, happens to me all the time, okay? Do not wait for a woman to point that out. It would be like much better probably if it comes from a man, and it will take it, and you can just simply say, you don't have to leave the group, you don't have to be like stop being friends with that person. In that way we won't have any friends left, if we stop being friends with every person who makes a sexist joke. But just point it out to them and say that, hey, that was not cool, or maybe that, hey, it was a bit homophobic, I don't know why you think that's funny, I didn't find it funny. I have actually done it. I have actually done it to a very close friend of mine. And I said, she was just yesterday, she sent something about Riya Chakraborty. And I said, I just don't find it funny that a whole national media, when we have the economic contracting, that the whole national media is hounding one person. If she is guilty, they will go to the court. I'm sure the CBI is capable enough to find out. So you can, there is an idea that the moment you confront, you kind of do not participate in a sexist joke, you become uncool. Stop making that uncool. We can all do that together. So yeah, and I don't think you should ever be afraid of being a killjoy. You don't know how much it means to a woman when a man in a group says, hey, that's not cool. That makes that space so much more safer for that woman to be in, to participate in, and your leaving that space is absolutely no solution at all. It's not helping anyone by you leaving. You're just escaping.
Right. Dr. Chakraborty, that was very, very helpful. But I think we have a couple of more questions, and I don't know whether you're able to see the chat.
Yep.
Not that I'm able to understand this question. I want to take up two questions which are not essentially related. So this question about Zomato announcing period leave for women, would you consider that helpful or in this situation? I think Shweta's question brings about the idea of sameness versus equality. Sameness is not the same as equality. I think that is something that we need to understand very clearly, that treating people same might not be treating people equal. So I think, if you'd like to comment on
equity and equality, and I can't go into detail about it, but you see, the thing is, the idea of equity is that different people have different life situations. So to give them equal opportunities, someone might need a bit more help than another. So that's the very crude idea of what equity means, right? Whereas equality means you blind way, which might say, for example, if someone has already number of benefits due to structural benefits that they have, treating everyone equally is just giving him more leverage, right? So in terms of what you were asking, yes, period leave, especially after what Barkha said, is so contentious. But absolutely, for some women, especially women with endometriosis, these are absolutely debilitating conditions. I have seen women who have passed out because of pain from periods, and our society has so much of superstition just talking about period, man. Like, we don't talk about menstruation at all. Women cannot even go and tell their boss that, I really can't work, I have period pains. So the leaves is, I think it's a very good thing to happen. It gives women the space to be able to, come on, let's accept that it is a bodily condition that men don't suffer from. So the day they start having periods, they can ask for the leaves too, right?
Right. Orpika, there's also a question about, this is Sartaj's question. I am not entirely sure of what Sartaj means by consent here, but I'm presuming his idea is that, Sartaj, if you're here, would you like to clarify what your query was? I don't know whether Sartaj is here. Anyway,
Yes,
go ahead.
So, I was basically pointing out to the fact that as ma'am was discussing regarding the question of asking and how we have to ask out or when sent, let's say. So, but that also may be determined as sexual harassment or being a sexist in a way, because let's say something old school or something which might also be sexist, like opening a door or something.
Opening, sorry, can you say that again?
Opening a door for someone who's maybe having 2 bags in her hand, let's say, for a woman. So would that be sexist? So where exactly the line is, because it actually isn't clear, in my opinion. Yeah.
No, you are absolutely right. It's there are many, like I said, it is a gray area, and it will remain gray as long as we talk about it, So for example, the example that you gave, I don't think that's anyone would consider that harassment. Will someone consider that sexist? Yes, if you are opening a door only for a woman and not for men, yes, probably they will. But that being sexist, and sexism and sexual harassment are two different things. Sexism is when you treat men and women differently. Sexual harassment is when you harass someone by making expletive remarks, by physical or
harassment of some sort.
Not only physical harassment, there can be digital harassments also, right?
Correct.
So, Sartaj, there's a difference between sexism, and you can be sexist, but maybe you're not a sexual harasser. Being sexist is not cool, of course. Like, if you open doors, Sartaj, for women and don't do it for men, I suggest you start doing it for men as well. Don't stop it doing for women. Start doing it for men as well.
Yeah, right. And I think Sartaj, the question of consent cannot be equated with the question of being polite. Consent is not about politeness, right? Yes, I agree that if you're generally kind, you'd probably be polite, but consent and politeness cannot be equated, right? So I think that's an important point. A lot of questions. Sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I was saying like when we talk about consent, that we are talking about it in a very sexual way. We are particularly talking about sexual situations when you want to have sex with someone and you are asking for their consent. We are not talking about everyday situations about, say, for example, opening doors or everyday situations where you treat men or women differently.
Yeah, so I think that, as Dr. Chakraborty very correctly pointed out, that the line between sexism and sexual harassment is very important to understand here. So a lot of people here have questions about, I think, extended medical leave. I think we have addressed that. So because I think this seems to be sort of a pain point, right? Why
Point
should
of
women get
consent.
more leave than men? Because then we are considering biological essentialism. That seems to be the idea. And so I keep saying this in my class. You all know Harari's book *Sapiens* has this
Yeah.
beautiful line, which is quoting, which says that biology enables, culture forbids, right? So this idea of certain cultural traditions, which is also inbuilt into the role of masculine stereotypes,
Yes.
right? That men don't cry, right? Men don't cry, which you started out this talk with,
Totally.
right? So men suffer from sexism as much as women do. In some cases, that is largely built into the stereotype of being a man. Of the stereotype of being a man has a lot of privileges, which is why you keep performing that. We've discussed this in the past as well, as opposed to the stereotypes of being a woman, which you don't know, you will get punished heavily, right? So that seems to be one key idea. So I think one question that I don't think. Sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I wanted to say something like just something not directly related, but you were talking about like stand-up comedy, and I would say that I'm very proud about some Indian stand-up comedians, because if we look at the international stand-up scenario and the names one after the other that have come up, and then when you see like people like Karunesh Talwar, for example, like absolutely brilliant people who do not need to resort to any kind of sexism to be funny. So you don't have to sexist to be funny. Like they are living proofs of that.
Right. So I think Monica's question, in work culture, certain comments and notions are sexist, but do affect the victim on a personal basis. For example, a man is said to perform strategies, but if a woman does the same, she's said to be playing games. These comments made on the woman is sexist, but it's more personal to the victim as a result of her own action. How, as a bystander, do I help this, as I find this highly uncomfortable? I take up this question because I'm happy to take up the other questions as well, because it directly talks about the idea of a bystander. This is Monica's question.
Sorry, I just need to read it once more.
Sure.
Yes, totally, Monica. And this, I have faced it myself. Like, and my boss came and told me, like, "Oh, Arpita, but you are so bossy." And I looked at her and I said, "You know what? And this happened here. So, like, this happened here, where there are so many structures here, as in Dublin, where there are so many structures in place, to prevent this kind of thing and perpetuate the European culture and everything." So I looked at her and I said, what, if this was a man, you would have said that I have leadership quality. So yes, I totally understand the examples, the things that you're saying, that when it's done by a man, it's strategy, but when it's done by a woman, it's playing games. It's also like it plays into the idea of shaming women, because shame is a very powerful social construct, and it works really well to keep women under control within those misogynist frameworks that have been built. Women are sluts, women are shameless, women are hoarding their way up. The more, like, there are so many of these ways that this happens. What you, as a bystander, how you can help is, first of all, do not participate in any of that. Do not ever to it. Second, if you know that something is spoken about this woman, and you know the woman personally, you try to ask her whether she needs help, whether she is comfortable, whether she wants to do anything about it. Unfortunately, these are situations which are very gray areas, right? So it does not constitute sexual harassment, but it is sexist. Like I was telling Sartaj, there's a difference, right? So for these sexist things, the only thing as a bystander that you can do is constantly provide a support network and help, and kind of, if possible, I understand that at workplaces, it's not always easy to confront people, but sometimes, you can just casually. I remember a feminist conference where someone said, eye roll is a very good way. Like when someone says something like that in front of you, you just go like, oh, again. So that shows men that, like, oh, this is something that people are noticing that I'm saying. There are body language cues, which are very important social strategies in navigating these things. And if you look up online, you will see how you can use body language to confront these kind of situations.
Right. Thank you so much, Urvita. There's a couple of questions about the idea of how do you confront this on family WhatsApp groups, right? So how do you confront? And I think that's an important question with that kind of casual sexism that comes along, right? How do you do that? Is there a way? And something that's been added in by a participant here, that oftentimes these kind of behaviors are called out and they're only taken seriously if they're called out by a man and less so by a woman. She's considered sensitive. So if you would like to take that out, take those two questions together.
I would say, and this is a very personal opinion and from personal experience. So I come from a very conservative, upper casteist Brahmin kind of family, right? So we have this WhatsApp group of all the cousins together, and I have decided